Hi guys, thank you for clicking on this video. My name's Aisha and this is Aisha Lee-Ann Talks. So today I'm going to be talking about the life and the suicide of Chester Bennington. Chester Bennington was the lead singer to Linkin Park. Now, Linkin Park was a band that I grew up listening to throughout my entire childhood. So when I heard that Chester had committed suicide, that really did quite upset me. It was one of the very, very few deaths of celebrity deaths that have actually really upset me. So I thought it would be quite fitting to begin by telling his life story. Just quickly before we begin though, the dogs in my house are still being a bit of a pain in the ass. So if there's any noises in the background, I apologise, it is my dogs. So just a quick trigger warning, in this story we are going to be talking about suicide and child abuse, drug addiction and quite serious mental health problems. So, Chester Charles Bennington was born on the 20th of March 1976 in Phoenix, Arizona. He was the youngest of 4 siblings. His mother's name was Suzanne Elaine Johnson and she worked as a nurse, and his father's name was Lee Russell Bennington. He worked as a police officer that worked on child abuse cases, which I find quite a strange coincidence considering that at the age of 7, Chester himself began being molested by an older friend. He once said that it began as just an innocent, you show me yours if I show you mine kind of thing, which then began turning into quite much more forceful acts. And unfortunately, Chester was just too afraid to actually speak out, like, a lot of people are, because he was concerned and worried that people wouldn't actually believe him. And if they did believe him, that maybe they might think he was gay, because, back then there was a lot more stigma attached to being gay. So he just didn't want to come forward. This abuse then continued for 6 years, went on from the age of 7 to the age of 13. I'm not entirely sure. I can't find out why he actually, why the abuse stopped. But I did find out that he confided in his father many years later, but then ultimately decided not to press charges. The reason he decided not to press charges was because the person who was actually molesting him apparently was being molested himself. So he just didn't really feel like he wanted to press charges anyway. So it went on unnoticed and unpunished. Chester once stated in an interview while recounting his abuse, I am going to read it from the laptop just to make sure that I get the quote right. If I look back to when I was really young and I was being molested, to when all of these horrible things were happening around me, I shudder. I was getting beaten up and forced to do things I didn't want to do. It destroyed my self-confidence, and like most people, I was too afraid to say anything. And to me, I just find that so sad. Like, people who get abused, get molested, are too afraid to come forward because they're worried about what people are going to think of them. I just wish there wasn't so much stigma attached to things, so that people could come forward, because it happens way too often. Anyway, moving on a little bit here. Chester's parents got divorced when he was 11 and his father gained custody of him in the divorce. But from what I can tell, Chester has described his father as being quite emotionally unstable. And obviously the abuse that Chester was suffering had quite a huge impact on his mental health. He once said that he spent a lot of time considering murdering everybody and running away. So this just goes to show, at a young age, how much he was actually struggling. And then at the age of 13, his sister came in the room to find him moments away from shooting himself in the head with a shotgun. So again, this just goes to show how much he was actually struggling, at 13 years old, to be struggling with suicidal ideation. It is just absolutely horrific. So to comfort himself, Chester would draw pictures and write poetry, which is then what led him to start writing music. So he actually got into music at quite a young age because it was one of the things that actually, helped him deal with what he was going through. His inspirations were a band called Depeche Mode, the Stone Temple Pilots, which was a band that he'd always dreamed of joining. And it was said somewhere that actually he was a huge Madonna fan, which I thought was quite cool. But on top of his troubles at home, he was also being quite badly bullied at school. He once said that he was knocked around like a rag doll for being skinny and looking different. So safe to say, you know, his school life also wasn't too great. And unfortunately, at a very young age, he once said at about 11 or 12, he started taking various kinds of drugs and, you know, started going down quite a rough path. At the age of 17, he moved back in with his mother, and he, was in quite a horrific state when he arrived there. She ended up actually, you know, banning him from leaving the house. He said in another interview that his mother said that he'd looked like he'd stepped out of Auschwitz. So he began smoking pot, and every time he got a craving for drugs, he would use pot instead. So, you know, his mother locked him away into the house. He stayed in his house and he used weed to come off of the harder drugs, at which point he was trying to turn his life around, but ultimately he did end up going back to it a few years later. There was a point where he essentially ended up homeless for a while. He was sofa surfing, staying at friends' houses, and he actually ended up spending a couple of nights staying in his car. He said in an interview again, like, I've got it written here, "My car was a piece of shit. It wouldn't even go above 35 miles per hour. 2 lights had burned out and I didn't have the money to replace them." So, you know, again, like, he was struggling so much throughout not only his childhood, but his teenage years too, and then right on into his adulthood. You know, going through these things at such a early age, it really does mess with your head. So like I said before, he did actually end up going back to drugs, and in 1992, he was in a house and the house got broken into and all of his friends were getting pistol whipped. It kind of terrified the life out of him, which is again when he took that step and tried once again to stop taking drugs. He managed to get himself a job at a Burger King, apparently, before he went on to become a musician. I mean, he didn't start off straight into Linkin Park. He started off with a few local bands. The most notable band that he joined was a band called Grey Days. They recorded their first demo in 1993, which ironically was the year that I was born. In 1994, they released an album called Wake Me. Then in 1997, they released their second album, which they called No Sun Today. Then 1998, he left the band. On October 31st, 1996, Chester married his first wife, Samantha. They then went on to have 3 children. Jamie, who was born on the 19th of April 1996. Isaiah, who was born on the 18th of November 1997. And Draven, who was born on the 19th of April 2002. When Chester left the band Grey Days, he said that he had become quite frustrated and had almost given up on actually performing and doing music. That was until somebody named Jeff Blue, who was a VP at Zumba Music, offered him an audition for a band named Zero, which would actually go on to be renamed Linkin Park. So he actually quit his job where he was working at a digital services firm and actually went to California for this interview, for this audition. And he actually managed to secure a spot in the band. He left his birthday to go and record a second audition as well, which was quite good dedication. So Chester and Mike Shinoda, who was the other lead singer of the band, they actually got on really well and they worked really well together. They were improving, getting really good. But unfortunately, they were still really struggling to actually sign a record deal. And they kept getting turned away. They kept, they were struggling. And Jeff Blue, the same guy who helped them before, stepped in and helped them again. He actually managed to get them an interview with Warner. And on the 24th of October 2000, Linkin Park released their debut album, Hybrid Theory, which was the album that I grew up listening to. Chester and Mike actually wrote all the lyrics to all of the songs together. They based it off of some of their earlier material. Mike Shinoda once characterized the lyrics as interpretations of the universal emotions that we all feel and talk about. Chester once said in a Rolling Stones interview, again I'm going to read it from the laptop so I get it right, "It's easy to fall into that thing, poor me, that's where songs like Crawling come from. But that song was about taking responsibility for your actions. I don't say you at all, it's about how I'm the reason for how I feel this way. There's something inside me that pulls me down." Then unfortunately, Chester's relationship with his wife began to decline once he joined Linkin Park, and in 2005 him and his wife got divorced. This actually had quite a big impact on Chester's mental health, and he said in later years that at this time in his life he was considering suicide all over again, and that he was really struggling with his mental health. I think it was around this point where he actually started drinking alcohol. So he went from, taking loads of drugs to now he was drinking loads of alcohol. Linkin Park went on to be like a really successful band. They've got many awards. They've done quite a lot with it. He's also appeared on a few TV shows and been a few extras and things like this as well. So he hasn't just, stuck to his singing, but he's actually done acting too. In 2005, which was around the same time as he divorced from his wife Samantha, he co-founded another band which was called Dead by Sunrise. This was an electronic rock band from LA. Dead by Sunrise released their debut album Out of the Ashes on the 13th of October 2009. In 2006, Chester then went on to marry his second wife, whose name was Talinda. She was a former Playboy model. They go on to have 3 children together. Tyler Lee, who was born on the 16th of March 2006, and they have 2 twins called Lila and Lily, who were born on the 11th of November 2011. Between 2006 and 2007, Chester and his wife Talinda were a victim of a cyber hacker who was texting them and calling them and, stealing their details and all this kind of stuff. And they were this woman was calling them, saying things like, "I know where your children are," and "I have complete control of your lives," and things like this. That must be absolutely terrifying. I think, to be honest with you, if someone was doing that to me, I think I'd be pretty fucking scared. So yeah, they had to deal with that. And that went on for quite a long time. The police detectives finally did manage to actually catch the culprit. She was a 28-year-old woman named Devon Townsend. She was a crazed fan who actually worked in a nuclear weapons facility, which, again, when you find that out, that's quite terrifying in itself. When she was actually confronted about why she had been harassing the Benningtons, her excuse was because she was bored. I mean, really? Words cannot express the stupidity of that. Come on! Are you serious? When they actually went and they searched her home, they found a shrine that had been dedicated to Chester. It had pictures, it had a signed tissue, I think it said it was. They had, there was a Linkin Park poster above her kid's bed. Are you serious? This woman was totally obsessed. She even had pictures of all his kids and of his wives and, all the family photos and things like this. Creepy stalker kind of stuff, that must have been really terrifying for them. I'm not gonna lie, that is creepy. So obviously all of this went to court, and Devon was sentenced to 2 years, and she's expected to undergo kind of psychiatric evaluations and receive psychiatric care for her, stalker behaviour while she's in prison. So hopefully, when she came out, which she would have been out by now, she hopefully won't do that crap again. That's horrible. That's crazy. What a crazy lady. So that I said beforehand that he once dreamed of joining the Stone Temple Pilots? Well, in 2013, that dream actually became a reality. In February of 2013, Stone Temple Pilots actually let go of their lead singer, which was a person named Scott Weiland. And in March of that year, they went on to hire Chester as his replacement. The The band played together for the very first time on the 18th of May 2013. The set included both old singles and one of their new singles, which was a song called Out of Time. After this, the band then announced that Chester was going to be taking on the role as frontman, and they were actually discussing a group tour, which I'm sure Chester was like well over the moon about. You know, he'd always dreamed of joining this band, and now he was going to become their frontman, and he was going on a world tour, and you know, that must have been amazing for him. He once said when he was reflecting on joining that band, "Every band has its own kind of vibe. Stone Temple Pilots is this sexier, more classic rock feel to it. Linkin Park is very modern, very tech-heavy type of band. I grew up listening to these guys, so when this opportunity came up, it was a no-brainer." So yeah, of course, this was his dream. He was well over the moon to be a part of this band. But in 2015, Chester made the decision to actually leave Stone Temple Pilots to, you know, stay with Linkin Park because of his commitments to Linkin Park, and you know, he was finding it a bit too much to be a part of both, I think. So he left on good terms, and he was then replaced. Chester struggled throughout his life with drug addiction, and you know, he struggled with his mental health really quite badly. So there were multiple times where he'd fall off the wagon and begin drinking quite heavily or taking loads of drugs. He once stated in another interview, "I was on 11 hits of acid a day. I dropped so much acid that I'm surprised I can still speak. I'd smoke a bunch of crack, then do a bunch of meth, and I'd just sit there and freak out. And then I would use opium to come down." So that just goes to show like how much he was actually taking and what the drugs were actually doing to him. Like that's an excessive amount of drugs to be taking. In 2015, the band and some of his friends and family staged an intervention, after which he announced that he was going to give up drinking, give up all drugs, because he said that he just didn't want to be that person anymore. He said in another interview afterwards, "I knew that I had a drinking problem, a drug problem, and that parts of my personal life were crazy, but I didn't realise how much it was affecting the people around me until I got a dose of, here is what you're really like, and it was a shock." But unfortunately, it looks like that didn't really last very long, because in 2016, he actually attempted to commit suicide once again when he left his apartment or left his house, absolutely bladdered with a gun, claiming that he was going to go and shoot himself. Thankfully, he had a change of heart and didn't go through with it. So Chester's actually had quite a few bouts of like illnesses and injuries and things, and this guy is one tough cookie, I'm telling you. In 2013, during the recording for his album Meteora, he was experiencing some severe stomach pains, and he still continued wanting to go on and carry on and carry on and carry on and carry on recording, and you know, tried his best. And then it came to it and he just had to go to the hospital. Turned out that he had a hernia. So yeah, you know, that had to be dealt with. It was actually getting that bad that like when he was trying to sing, it was making him vomit because it was irritating the hernia and it was like making him sick. But yeah, he was still there trying to carry on singing, carry on recording this album. But no, it's fine, let's carry on going. And ends up in hospital having to have surgery for this hernia. Now, this hernia that he had would actually go on and cause him some more problems in the future as well. So it wasn't just that once. Like there was another time that he was also hospitalized for it. I can't remember the year. It was in 2011, so he actually had to cancel a whole tour, like, or the remainder of a tour, 3 shows, because he just couldn't actually continue and had to go to hospital for surgery again. I think that was his 1,000 Suns tour. In 2007, Chester managed to break his wrist while jumping off of a stage and actually managed to complete the entire show with a broken wrist, didn't even flinch, carried on with his show and didn't go to the ER until afterwards to get it fixed. Like, this is what I mean, this guy is insane. There was another tour that he had that he fell off the stage and broke his shoulder. He continued that show with a strapped up shoulder, but then had to go on and cancel the last show of the tour, unfortunately. I think that was in Florida. Then during a basketball game in 2015, he actually managed to injure his ankle, and he still continued trying to play this basketball game on crutches and a knee scooter. Now, I didn't know what a knee scooter was, so I had to Google it. So yeah, this is what a knee scooter is. Not an e-scooter, a knee scooter. Like a knee scooter. Back in the early 2000s, Chester became really good friends with Chris Cornell, lead singer of Soundgarden and Audioslave. During the Project Revolution tour that they took together, they actually ended up joining each other on stage. So Chester joined Chris for one of his songs, and then Chris joined Chester for one of his songs. And following that, they became really good friends, and their families became really good friends. There's actually photos of, you know, their wives together and stuff. Like they got on really well. Chris even asked for Chester to be the godfather to his daughter, so you know, that's how close these families really were. Then unfortunately, on the 18th of May 2007, Chris Cornell was found dead in his home after hanging himself. Chris's death had a huge impact on Chester. Chester was absolutely devastated. He had said in one of his statements that, you know, he couldn't imagine a world without him in it, without Chris in it. And it really did affect him. It affected him so badly that he actually relapsed and ended up starting drinking again. And, you know, I don't think he was drinking every day, but he was really struggling. Chester became so emotional during his performance of One More Light on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, which they had done in honour of Chris. The band was actually supposed to be doing their newest single, which was Heavy, and they ended up changing their mind and singing One More Light in Chris's honour because the song was actually about the death of a friend. Mike Shinoda claimed that during rehearsal, Chester had become so emotional while performing and while trying to, you know, perform the song that they couldn't actually finish. And then while he was actually performing the song on the show, he got to the end of the song and couldn't actually finish the last couple of lines. Then at Chris's funeral on the 26th of May, Chester stood up and sang Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. A few months later, while he was on holiday with his wife and kids, he arrived home early, saying that he had some work to do. It said that he arrived home a little before 9 a.m. on the 12th of July 2017. Just a quick side note, this was actually Chris Cornell's birthday. Then, to the shock of the entire world, later on that day, his housekeeper came home to find him dead. He had hung himself. His death was ruled as a suicide, and he hadn't left any note. A half-empty alcohol bottle was found at the scene, and his toxicology report said that he had only trace amounts of alcohol in his system. Mike Shinoda addressed Chester's death by saying, "Shocked and heartbroken, but it's true. An official statement will come out when we have one." Chester's funeral was held on the 12th of October 2017 at the South Coast Botanical Gardens at his home in Palos Verdes Estate in California. There were so many tributes following Chester's death. You know, Chester's death really did shock the world, like to the point that suicide rates after Chester's death really increased. It shook everybody. Fred Durst, the lead singer of Limp Bizkit, he stated, "If it were not for Chester's voice and his words, nu metal would never have reached the masses and affected so many lives. One of the most honest vocalists out there when it comes to his mental health." Chester's widow, Talinda, she said, "This was not a time that any of our family suspected this to happen, which is terrifying, you know, because it can happen at any moment with those thoughts."
What do you guys have?
This is chocolate pudding or canned dog food. Let's hope for the best, world. I just drank myself and I'm gonna die.
Oh shit, the same thing.
Okay, just a minute.
Double
Three,
dog screw.
I either got rotten egg or something else.
three,
Guys,
two, one, go.
And that clip just goes to show, I mean, that clip was taken within 36 hours before his death. Talinda, his widow, launched a campaign after his death called 320 Changes Direction, and Linkin Park went into a hiatus. When he was asked recently in April of 2022, Mike Shinoda said that they still have no plans of recording a new album or touring. They are just basically saying goodbye to Linkin Park. Chester had actually spoken up about his mental health quite a few times in the past. I've taken another section here from another interview. I don't know if anyone can relate, but I have a hard time with life. When I'm in my head, my whole life gets thrown off. I don't say nice things to myself. There's another Chester in there that wants to take me down. I drive myself nuts. I mean, I think a lot of us probably can relate to that. And a lot of us do drive ourselves nuts. 10 days after Chester's death, his entire house had to be surrounded with a 6-foot perimeter, and the police were stationed all around his house because people were coming from far and wide to come and leave tributes by the house, leaving flowers, leaving guitar picks, leaving all manner of different things that they had brought to come and, pay tribute. One of the notes that had been left at the perimeter said, "Fly free now with love, all the way from Texas." Another one of them, which is the one that got me, it said, "Dear Chester Bennington, it hurts all of us to know that you saved so many lives, yet we couldn't save you." And I think that brings us to the end of the video. I'm sorry, that was quite a sad ending. I promise they won't all be like that. But if any of you are actually struggling with any of the topics that we have covered in this video, please, 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 please reach out for help. Please talk to somebody, even if that's your doctor, your mum, your friend, your neighbour, somebody. Please, please reach out, because everybody struggles, and there is no harm in reaching out. There is no shame in reaching out for help, and there will be people there to support you. So please, please do not suffer in silence. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you are new here and you don't know what I do, I tell hardship stories covering anything from disability to trauma to homelessness. I cover celebrity stories, I cover everyday people stories, and I also cover current and historical events. The aim behind this is to raise awareness and educate people on the hardships that everyday people and all people face. So if you have a story that you would like to share, you can contact me via my email or my Facebook, which I will leave linked in the description box down below. Otherwise, I really hope that you will subscribe and please hit that like button. It's a free and easy way that you can support this channel. And until next time, please remember to take very good care of yourselves and be kind to everybody around you, because you never know what somebody else might be going through, and a little bit of kindness and compassion can go a long way. Bye bye for now.